Hello everyone and welcome back to my sewing room. If you're new, my name's Diane and I like to share with you the stories of the quilts that I make. And this week I would like to share with you the story of the plain sailing quilt. Now this quilt came to me out of the blue. I was working on the Prairie Queen quilt, which is just basically shoe flies put together, and I was working on the little 4 patches that form the side of the shoe fly, and they take quite a while. The little blue squares and the white squares in that 4 patch are less than an inch big, and I was putting those together. And when you're working on a smaller project like this, it seems to sometimes be going on forever, and so I thought I would spend the day making just the blue and white squares. And I was recalling our summer holiday that we took in June to the Isle of Wight. And on the day that we took the ferry over to the Isle of Wight, it was the annual Isle of Wight yacht race. And this year it was won by an 84-year-old gentleman called Peter Cunningham. And I was thinking about that, and I thought I would make a quilt of a yacht race. So the first thing I did was to take out some nice blue pieces of fabric that I had in my stash, and some white for the sails, and some browns that would create the hull of the yachts. And when I'd selected the water and the sails and the hull, I needed to find some beautiful bright fabrics to create the fish. I wasn't going to try and make fish that looked like fish shapes. I was just going to use some half square triangles or smaller triangles just to represent fish in the ocean. And so once I'd gathered all of the fabric together, I thought I needed a design. I wanted to have a sort of circular motion quilt. I wanted to try and capture the image of yachts sailing around the island, and then all the fish in the ocean swimming around underneath those hulls of the yachts. And so I took out my graph paper and I marked out the area of the sort of size of the quilt I wanted, and then I just got a disc and I drew around that in the centre of the quilt, just to give me an idea of how I could place all of the triangles around that circle, and that would form the shoals of fish swimming, and then I would have the yacht in the centre. And I'll confess now that I did find it difficult to draw out the complete design, and so what I decided to do was to just draw 1 quadrant, and then I would have 4 identical quadrants, and that would give me the circular motion. So now I had a plan of how I was going to put this quilt together, and if you are interested, I will put all the details that I'll show to you as this quilt develops on my community post. So if you are subscribed, just go to my YouTube page, look for posts, and you will see all those details. All of the blocks that I've used are 3-inch squares or 3-inch half square triangles, and I also used some 3-inch blue squares with a stitch and flip method, where I've just put a little triangle on the corner for the smaller fish. So all of those details, like I say, will be on my community post. So then my next step was to look across the quilt and see all of the pieces that I'd need. So all of the half square triangles that I would need, and also how many 3-inch squares I'd need. So you can see here in the blue and white half square triangle, I needed 36 of those. And the method I used to create my half square triangles was to take a square 4 3/4 inches, 2 squares right sides together, sew a 1/4 inch seam around the outside, snip off the corners, cut on the diagonal, and that would give me 4 3-inch half square triangles. And then it was just a case of looking at my guide and seeing how many half square triangles I would need, and then I would sew those together, and then I would move on to the next one. And I found that quite relaxing sewing, so I just put some music on and sewed away. And I gathered all of those half square triangles together in a tray and set those aside. I didn't cut all of the 3-inch squares that I needed at that time, and I didn't bother counting because I was a bit fed up of counting. So what I did was to cut strips of fabric 3 inches width of fabric and cut a few of each colour as I knew I'd need them. So when I'd cut all of those half square triangles and put them on the tray, and I had the strips of fabric ready for the 3-inch squares, it's a little bit like an artist, I think, mixing colours. So that was my palette, and so I would just be pulling from those. Obviously the yachts were quite formal the way they were put together, but there was a little bit of leeway for the fish and the colours of the fish that I would use below on each of the blocks. Once I decided on one block, I was going to do that identical for the other 3. So there are 4 identical quadrants in this quilt. So I placed all the individual parts out on the table, and then I sewed those together and I pressed those and I put that on the design board and sat back and had a look. After a while I thought I was happy with that, and so I made 3 more identical blocks, and I used this method to construct the whole of that quadrant. So I just had a look how many I would need for the next block, counted up the parts, laid them out, sewed them together, had a look at them, and then I put them on the board. And I apologise for the poor lighting. This is a very low-key operation coming from my sewing room. I just film everything on my phone in front of a window, so I don't have lights. I don't have space to put lights up, light stands or anything. And so, like I say, it was a little bit dark, some of these images. I think you can see them though. I've had to close the blinds because it was so hot. It's crazy really. We wait all winter for a little bit of sunshine, and then when it comes we draw all the blinds to keep the heat out, but never mind. I hope you can see what I'm trying to explain. So I put all of the finished blocks on my design board, and then I just had a quick look over them just to make sure that I hadn't made any mistakes, anything that was glaringly obviously wrong. Everything seemed okay. So the larger fish in this quilt are 3-inch half square triangles, so it's a blue with a bright colour. And then for the smaller fish I took a 3-inch square because I have some of these already processed, and I cut on the diagonal. And then I took a 3-inch blue square and used that little triangle that I'd taken off, put it on the side and stitch and flipped, and I chain pieced those. I used a lot of those, and so I just sewed rows and rows of those and then snipped the backing off, pressed and trimmed 2 3-inch squares. So once I'd completed all 4 quadrants, I just needed some sashing just to join them all together, 4 pieces of sashing. And where they met in the centre, there's a 3-inch gap. And I decided that on the top of each yacht, I'd like a little red flag. Now, I don't know anything about sailing, so I'm hoping a red flag doesn't indicate anything bad. It's not like the Jolly Roger or anything. But so I decided for aesthetics that a red flag would look nice. So I put a little red flag on the top, and I thought that if I made a little pinwheel, I could get all the flags flying in the same way as the sails. And so I made a little red and blue pinwheel, and that brought everything together. So I just took 2 3-inch squares, placed them right side together, sewed around the edge of that square, snipped off the corners, cut on the diagonal, and then I joined them back together to give me a pinwheel. So I put the pinwheel in the centre of the design board, and then I joined blocks A and B together and I set them out. And then I joined blocks C and D together and put those on the board next to it just to make sure everything was okay. So I joined each of those quadrants together, and now I just needed to add the sashing. So I decided that I would join the top left and bottom left with a piece of sashing. Then I would move across and join top right, bottom right with another piece of sashing. And after I did that, I would join those together so I had a left and a right side of the quilt. And then I would make the sashing with the centerpiece of the pinwheel on. So I'd join the left hand side together and I'd put the sashing on. But before I added the right side, I decided that I was going to put 3-inch sashing all the way around. And so I put my sashing on the left hand side first, and then I put the sashing on the right hand side just to help with the weight, and then I joined them all together. And then for the backing, I decided that I would use this really lovely jellyfish. It's got a black background, so it's quite dark, but it is the bottom of the ocean, which is dark, so I was happy with that. And I decided that I would use that for the backing. Unfortunately, I had to piece it. I didn't have enough. I used what I had, and I had to put some black cotton in with the backing, and then I just quilted it all together following the squares. So it was a grid quilting on this one. And here you can see on the backing where I had to piece that. It's a shame I didn't have enough, but I just had to make do with what I had, and that's what I had on this occasion. And that concludes the story of this quilt, the plain sailing quilt. So there's memories of my holidays. I'm going to put this one in my folksy shop. Now, I'm not sure when I'll be making the next video, because if you are regular to my channel, you'll see that I've been working on multiple projects, and at the moment there's nothing near completion. There's 3 projects on the go at the moment. So you can see they are 3-inch squares. That's a floral one I'm working on, scrappy little one, and I think I'm going to make some bigger flowers. I'm going to play with that today. And so I don't know when I'm going to be finishing these next quilts, because they are very time consuming. I have got an empty drawer, so I now can start another one. And Julie, I am going to start the Christmas village. I don't know how long it's going to take me. It will be an improv quilt. I have started, I don't know if you can see that, a little design, but I don't think I'm going to stick to it. I'm not inspired really to do a design first and then create a village. And so I'm going to be working on smaller projects that take a lot of time, and when I finish one I will share them with you. If you want to see them and you don't want to miss them, perhaps you might want to hit the subscribe button and the notification one. Otherwise, I will be back at some point. So enjoy your sewing, whatever you're doing, and thank you for still being with me at the end of this video, and I'll share with you some final shots of plain sailing. So thank you again for your company. Enjoy your sewing, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.